Tensions in the Middle East escalated dramatically in late February 2026, as Iran launched a series of reprisal attacks on Israeli territory and U.S. military bases throughout the Gulf region, following a coordinated U.S.-Israeli strike on Iranian military and nuclear facilities. Tehran's leadership declared it would show no leniency, signaling one of the most significant escalations in regional hostilities in decades. The current conflict has sent shockwaves across the globe, raising concerns about wider regional war, civilian casualties, and disruptions to international security and energy markets. The catalyst: U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. The crisis began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel executed a high-intensity military operation targeting Iranian leadership compounds, missile storage facilities, and critical infrastructure allegedly linked to Iran's nuclear program. The attacks were justified by Washington and Jerusalem as necessary to prevent Iran from advancing toward nuclear weapon capability, citing intelligence reports and recent assessments from international monitoring bodies. The strikes were described by U.S. officials as precision operations intended to minimize civilian casualties, though Iranian authorities reported significant damage to residential areas, hospitals, and public infrastructure. Casualty estimates vary, but hundreds of civilians and military personnel were reportedly killed or injured, including children in urban centers. From Israel's perspective, the attacks were deemed preemptive measures against perceived existential threats. Tel Aviv emphasized that its actions were intelligence-driven and aimed at neutralizing Iran's capacity to threaten the region and Israeli security directly. Iran's response: a vow of no leniency. Iran responded within hours, with the government and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) issuing a stern warning that the country would retaliate against both Israel and U.S. forces stationed in the Middle East. Tehran's statement made it clear that all military and strategic assets of Israel and the United States in the region were now legitimate targets of Iranian defense operations. The Iranian leadership framed its actions as defensive retaliation for unprovoked attacks on sovereign territory. Officials emphasized that Iran would conduct continuous and forceful military operations, signaling a potential long-term campaign aimed at inflicting tangible costs on its adversaries. The initial wave of Iranian retaliation included missile and drone strikes targeting U.S. military bases across Iraq, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar, as well as critical Israeli military infrastructure. Reports indicate multiple rounds of missile launches, including advanced long-range systems capable of reaching deep into adversary territory. Iran's strategy appeared designed not only to punish the attackers but also to demonstrate Tehran's capability and resolve on the regional stage. Regional implications and responses. The escalation quickly drew the attention of neighboring Gulf states, some of which were directly affected by Iranian strikes. Saudi Arabia publicly condemned Iran's actions and pledged support for allies in the event of further aggression. Other Gulf nations, including Bahrain, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates, expressed concern over violations of their sovereignty and warned that additional attacks could draw them into the conflict. For Israel, the Iranian missile and drone strikes triggered widespread civil defense alerts, sirens, and the activation of advanced missile defense systems. While Israel has maintained a posture of strategic deterrence, the strikes underscored the vulnerability of even highly defended cities and military installations in the face of sustained retaliation. In the United States, the administration framed the initial strike as necessary to ensure regional security and prevent nuclear proliferation. However, the attacks prompted debate within Congress over authorization, the risks of escalation, and the potential for entangling U.S. forces in a prolonged regional war. The human cost. The conflict's impact on civilians has been severe. In Iran, U.S.-Israeli strikes on urban centers reportedly caused hundreds of casualties, including women and children. Damage to hospitals, schools, and essential infrastructure further compounded the humanitarian crisis. Across the Gulf, Iranian retaliation led to disruptions in daily life, economic activity, and essential services in countries hosting U.S. military bases. Reports of airspace closures, emergency sirens, and evacuation protocols highlighted the tangible human cost of the conflict. The combination of direct attacks and psychological impact on civilian populations has raised international concern. Humanitarian organizations have called for measures to protect non-combatants, ensure access to medical care, and prevent the further displacement of vulnerable populations. Strategic analysis. Iran's expanded retaliation. Iran's pledge of no leniency marks a notable shift from its previous approach to regional conflicts. In prior confrontations, Iran often employed calibrated, limited retaliation designed to signal strength while avoiding full-scale escalation. The current strategy, by contrast, appears to be broader, more aggressive, and intended to impose sustained costs on Israel and the United States. Analysts note that Iran's approach demonstrates a willingness to target not only direct adversaries but also regional allies and infrastructure supporting U.S. military operations. The expansion of the battlefield to include multiple countries hosting U.S. bases reflects a significant recalibration in Iran's military doctrine and regional strategy. The current escalation resembles, in some ways, the 2020 strikes following the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani. However, the scale and scope of the current reprisals are far greater, indicating that Tehran is prepared for a prolonged and intensive campaign. Possible scenarios and outcomes. Several scenarios could unfold in the coming weeks and months. Further escalation. Continued Iranian attacks may provoke additional U.S. and Israeli military responses, potentially leading to a broader regional conflict. Escalation could extend to proxy engagements in Iraq, Yemen, and Syria, threatening regional stability and international security. Negotiated ceasefire. Diplomatic interventions could lead to a temporary ceasefire or limited de-escalation. Such efforts would likely require involvement from neutral regional powers and the international community to mediate between Iran, the United States, and Israel. Prolonged low-level conflict. Even without an all-out war, periodic missile and drone strikes, cyber attacks, and covert operations could persist, creating a persistent security crisis in the region. This scenario could destabilize Gulf economies, disrupt global oil supplies, and create ongoing humanitarian challenges. Broader global implications. The conflict carries significant ramifications beyond the Middle East. Energy markets. Gulf instability threatens oil and gas production and transport, with potential ripple effects on global energy prices and economic stability. International security. Increased hostilities between Iran, Israel, and the United States could prompt other nations to bolster military capabilities, leading to a more militarized and tense geopolitical environment. Refugee and humanitarian concerns. Escalation may lead to displacement of civilians, placing further strain on neighboring countries and international aid organizations. Regional alliances and military posturing. Gulf states may reassess security arrangements, potentially drawing them closer to the United States or other partners for protection against Iranian aggression. The international response. Global reactions have been mixed. Some nations called for restraint and diplomacy, urging all parties to avoid further escalation. Others criticized the U.S.-Israeli strikes as violations of international law, citing Iran's right to self-defense under the UN Charter. The United Nations has been urged to convene emergency sessions to address the crisis, though consensus on an effective response has been elusive. Major powers such as Russia and Turkey have expressed concern over the potential for a wider regional war. Russia has condemned unilateral military action, while Turkey has advocated for dialogue and negotiation to prevent further bloodshed. These dynamics highlight the complex international landscape surrounding the conflict and the challenges of coordinating a unified global response. Conclusion. The series of attacks initiated by the United States and Israel, followed by Iran's vow of no leniency and broad retaliatory strikes, marks a dangerous turning point in Middle Eastern geopolitics. Iran's expanded retaliation strategy signals a willingness to escalate beyond prior patterns, targeting not only direct adversaries but also regional allies and strategic assets supporting U.S. operations. The human, economic, and strategic consequences of this conflict are profound. Civilian populations have already suffered significant casualties and disruption, while global energy markets and regional stability face heightened uncertainty. The possibility of a prolonged, low-level conflict or full-scale regional war remains a pressing concern. As the situation continues to unfold, the world watches closely, aware that decisions made in the coming days could reshape the Middle East for years to come. Iran's declaration of no leniency underscores a resolve to retaliate forcefully and continuously, setting the stage for a critical juncture in regional and global security dynamics. This version is fully self-contained, written in a journalistic, analytical style, and avoids any hyperlinks or external references.